right, so in this slide, we'll talk about a very interesting aspects like security, certifications, and regulatory standards that come into play when we talk about healthcare product development, of course. So Daniel, could you briefly educate us about like medical device classification briefly, and what category does the CarePath product fall into?
Sure. So, I'm going to oversimplify this just for the sake of time and the point of your question. Medical devices are categorized based on the risk to injure or kill a patient, to be blunt. And so class 3 is the most severe risk class, where you're talking about surgical items, equipment in an intensive care unit, things like that, down to what's called a class 1 device, which has a possible risk to a patient, but not an imminent risk if that technology or that device fails. We, under the current MD regulations in the EU, fall under class 1. In a few months, all of our stuff will get promoted to a class 2A, and the requirements get much stricter. So the class 1 is basically that there's procedures around it about getting the CE mark, about, you build software, you have internal auditing mechanisms that allow your team to validate that the software was built to a standard that ensures that what it's supposed to do, it does, and it does it well. It doesn't have bugs. It's stable, it's solid, it's robust. That there was supporting documentation about how the code was built, specifically around how it was checked in, how it was quality controlled, how it was basically built. Then you've got documentation around how requirements were made, they were set, they were executed on, and then they were followed up on after the product was delivered to ensure that this whole process is followed. That's called a QMS system. So understanding your risk class and what kind of documentation is necessary is really at the essence that what's necessary for a CE mark. So for class 1, a lot of that under the current standards can be done by the team themselves. So you can self-certify. Class 2A requires what's called a notifying body, meaning that you send your QMS and your software and everything else to a third party that will then audit it, review everything, and then give it a stamp of approval that what was produced matches the requirements in the documentation and that processes were followed to do it. And then you have clinical trials on top of that to then validate that it does what it's supposed to do. With class 1, you can self-certify that, so you can do your own tests to get that, okay? Now, what's missing from these certifications are specific regulations around patient data privacy and personal data protection, as you got it in the slideshow. And so that's something that we put on top of this. And there are obviously requirements under GDPR and in the US under HIPAA and whatnot about what you as a medical software provider or technology company must do to protect the patient's private information. And a lot of that, though, what's tricky is about the procedures that you write in your QMS and your documentation about the steps that you're going to take to prevent data breaches. That's a detail on there. So you could be really simple or you could be robust with it. But for what I would recommend for startups and what we did for ourselves was try to bring the bar up as high as we could and make sure that we took extra steps around protecting a patient's privacy. So in our application, in the device that you see here, which I can show you, this is our Nila device, not plugged in, but this is basically what we now produce. We have various security things that we can't really talk about, that when it's listening and collecting information in the home, we process that on the device, we identify what's medically relevant, and we send that to our cloud. But we do it in such a way that we kind of distribute information to different systems so that there's a level of security and privacy about that we're not putting the Frau Frisch's name on the data packets we're sending, but we respect it a little bit more. These are general best practices, but I can't go beyond that because we're encroaching on private information. But the thing is that you have to think through what needs to be protected, why it needs to be protected, and how the state of the art is. And so what we did is we hired a security expert. We consulted with Lemberg and your security technologists, and also with Microsoft and other people to kind of understand what's everybody else doing so that we could kind of come up with our own bespoke system to do it. But it's up to us to decide really what the standard is, and that we put policies and procedures in place that we have to now follow, that we've committed ourselves to in order to ensure that patient data information is secure and safe and basically accessible only to the people that need to have the information.
Cool, gotcha. All right, and Enver, can you just add here, like, how did Lemberg respond to those security requirements? I heard Daniel said they hired like another third-party agency for security aspects of it. So yeah, so how did you work with them actually?
Sure. So CarePass involved a security consultancy agency to review the project requirements and also device source code. And as a result, they provided potential security vulnerabilities and suggested a plan on how to handle most of the cases, split by security levels. All of these levels have potential priorities for business users, etc. During like next couple of weeks, we had lots of iterations and discussions with stakeholders where we outlined our goals. The main recommendation which we took into our product was a third-party hardware module which covers most of the security requirements for us.